to the Saints Insider podcast for Wednesday, September 11th. As y'all can probably see, we are not in our Metairie studios today. Little bit of weather coming in. We'll talk a little bit about Hurricane Francine and how it's affecting the Saints, how it may affect us. So for the moment, I'm sitting here in my office looking out at the wind blowing out on our palm tree out here, hoping that it doesn't get too much worse. But fellas, I hope you're all staying safe and getting ready for the storm.
It's my first one of these, so welcome to New Orleans.
Yeah.
What do you think, Matt? What's your early impressions of hurricane preparedness?
Yeah, stores are very busy. I live right by a gas station, and it was just driving down my street was very busy because there were so many cars trying to get into that gas station. So made for an interesting. I don't know. Yeah, it's been interesting.
At least they had gas. A lot of places are already out, as usual. Gas and ice, and beer. Those are the three staples.
Those are three constant staples, even if it's not hurricane time. So, all right, guys, we got a lot to get into today and a short amount of time. So Saints are practicing early because of the storm here. First, before we get going, we want to let you know that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their bank decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Guys, we're going to get into a lot today about what happened in week one, about what we're kind of looking at in week two, and kind of how the Saints are preparing with Hurricane Francine about to hit the coast. But before we get into that, we're going to hit a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back in about a minute.
Ooh, I see at least 3 of them in there.
3 what?
Possums, big rats, I don't know.
Clarify big.
You're going to have to gut it.
How much is that going to cost? Maybe I should just move.
Maybe.
Is that your van?
Hi, strawberry mango. Mm-hmm. Here you go. Thank you. I'll take another one.
Football fans, with the Caesars Sportsbook app, you can be in the game all the time. Seeking instant action? Quick Picks offers you the most popular games and markets, already built for you and ready to bet. Experience the thrill when you stack your bets to create a super parlay. Build bets for your favorite teams and players across multiple games. This season, don't just watch the game. Download Caesars Sportsbook and experience the game like never before.
All right, welcome back. For those who cannot watch on the screen here, I'm Luke Johnson. I'm going to be hosting today. I'm joined by columnists Rod Walker and Jeff Duncan and my fellow beat writer Matthew Paris. Guys, before we kind of get into what we saw in week one, let's talk about the big news of the week here. Hurricane Francine is kind of barreling down on Louisiana. We don't know exactly what to expect, but we do expect the Saints to remain in place for the duration of the storm before they travel to Dallas this weekend. A little bit different, Dunk, than 2021 when we were, moved off to Dallas, Fort Worth for about 3 weeks and having to navigate that. And hopefully that situation kind of remains the same as it is right now.
Yeah, I think DA said it best earlier in the week, right? This organization knows how to deal with these type of situations better than any other team in the NFL. They've been down this road. They have an extensive hurricane preparedness policy that they follow and adhere to. I mean, I know off the top of my head at least 5 or 6 storms that they've either had to leave or at least alter their schedules because of. So it's just part of living here. And the good thing with the stability, one of the many good things with the stability of the organization, is everyone else in the front office has been through a lot of this too. It's not like the Carolina Panthers, for instance, turnover coaches every year and general managers. I mean, Mickey Loomis has been through this thing, these type of situations many times. So there's plenty of people in the organization to call on, to lean on. If you're, say, Derek Carr and your family's at home and you've not been through a hurricane before, there's plenty of people in the Saints organization that can lend their experience on what to do and how to prepare.
That being said, Matt, they are moving up practice by about an hour today, and they're probably going to have to get out of the facility so guys can go home and be with their families through all this. So, as somebody who's in their first time going through this, how do you think it's going to affect their preparation for a huge week 2 matchup against the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah, it's interesting because Wednesday is the day that they get in all the heavy work. Like, this is the day that is normally the longest practice, that they have pads on it and start really kind of drilling down things. So I'm sure it'll probably be a quicker practice. I saw Tyrann Mathieu tweet today. Does anyone know what time they're closing the Causeway Bridge? That's the thing too, is a lot of these guys, they don't necessarily live like directly in the New Orleans area. Like, they live across the bridge. It's quite a drive for them to get to the facilities. So once practice is over, guys are going to get the heck out of there because they want to beat the weather.
Yeah, hopefully nobody has to go up around by like Laplace and take the 2-hour drive up to the North Shore. Rod, you got anything to add on hurricane stuff? You just kind of hoping this thing gets blows over real quick and we don't have to deal with it.
You know me well, right? Just wanted to get over with you. I never get used to them. I mean, not being from here, but being from close to here, you always hear about them and just kind of being a part of them. I've sat through one and I've evacuated for one, the one with Ida. So, just want to get through this day and this weekend.
All right, so we're recording this Wednesday morning before Hurricane Francine makes landfall. So hopefully by the time everything is passed through today, we are all okay because we're all still here in New Orleans. But till then, we don't really know a whole lot about what's going to happen. So just keep it locked over at NOLA.com, especially our news reporters are out throughout southeastern Louisiana, and they're going to be reporting on everything that's happening. So make sure you are following along there. Fellas, let's get into what we do know, and that is the Saints absolutely throttled the Carolina Panthers week 1. Probably opened up a lot of eyes. Maybe they didn't. Maybe some people are like, hey, yeah, well, it was just the Panthers. Anybody can beat them by 37 points, which, is what it is. So as people who have been around this team for about more than a month now, throughout training camp and seeing them practice and seeing them compete against your own expectations, does a 47-10 win in week 1 against what a lot of people are anticipating might be one of the worst teams in the NFL, does that change your long-term outlook of the team? Jeff, I want to start with you on this one.
Yeah, Luke, I think if I can hedge a little bit, as bad columnists hedge all the time, right? So I think it does a little bit. I was actually impressed with how well the Saints executed. I don't think you can deny that. I mean, Derek Carr looked very comfortable in this scheme, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the Saints, 49ers, and Houston Texans are all like the leading rushing teams in the league, right? It's the same basically run scheme, and that's a good sign. For the Saints offense to operate the way they want to operate, it was almost, I'd say, a dream scenario, right? The running game worked. Derek Carr didn't have to carry the team, but he was extremely efficient. They avoided a lot of mistakes. I mean, all that stuff is good stuff. I don't care who you're playing. I mean, that's still an NFL team you're going against, and they made it look very easy. I think that's the thing I would be most concerned with is it felt like everything kind of went their way. I think that big early score really did open the floodgates a little bit. I think it made the Saints relax a little bit, energize the crowd. But they're not going to get a bunch of kickoff and punt returns and short fields like that, turnovers every week. It's going to be a lot harder, and especially against a better opponent. But I have to say, you have to be encouraged, and let's just wait and see. But it's certainly better than the alternative. I mean, if this team would have struggled, we'd all be really concerned. So to me, I think it's very encouraging.
Yeah, especially for someone. Would you pick them? Go 6-11?
Yeah. To me, they still could. They still could. That's the thing. That they still could. But the positive news was the way they executed this new offense that I think we all thought would take have some growing pains, and there were none in that first game.
Right. Rod, I'm curious of your take here, because you kind of were. You had this like kind of like Dunk talked in his preseason column. You had this wide cone of uncertainty for this team. You thought they could be pretty good, but they needed to show it. So did they show you in week 1?
They did. And I know, like Jeff said, I know it's Carolina, but Carolina's defense, especially front, is a little better than they didn't play that well, but I mean, they came to the game that you thought they were pretty decent. I mean, we didn't know if the Saints would be able to run against them or not. And to me, if they were able to do that, I mean, I had them going 8-9 when we did that. But I think I'm probably going to go up at least to 9-8 right now, and I'll have a much better gauge Sunday when we play the Cowboys. But I thought they did a lot of things well, and I didn't see this coming in. I don't think any of us saw this. Well, I know none of us saw this. For them to come out and score 9 straight possessions, if we had seen this in the preseason, and obviously those guys don't play that much in the preseason, but if we had seen even a glimpse of this in the preseason, I mean, I think we would have been a little bit more optimistic. But we saw some of the line struggle sometimes during the preseason games, and they held up. So if they can hold up, as this, because they're about to go through a gauntlet now, if they can hold up to this, then who knows.
Well, the one who was closest to seeing this coming was Matt, who picked the Saints to win 24-7 in Week 1 in his pregame prediction. Pretty close, Matt. Not 37 points, but not bad. So you expected them to win pretty handily, but even so, after seeing him go up 47-10, what did you think after Week 1, and how was your long-term outlook looking?
Yeah, I think the thing I was most surprised by was the effectiveness of the run game. Just in terms of what they were able to do with so much pre-snap motion, that wasn't a surprise. But Alvin Kamara ripping off 5.5 yards per carry on average. Like, we had talked about it all offseason, how much Kamara had left. I was kind of more on the negative side of that. I didn't know I needed to see it, but he looked completely fine, rejuvenated. And I just thought there were a lot of things that Clint Kubiak did that made a lot of sense. I thought he took advantage of the Saints' skill sets, like whether it was getting Kamara out in space, having the offensive line be really athletic. They pushed the ball down the field a lot. I looked this up. Derek Carr's deep he threw a deep pass that traveled 20 or more air yards, 17% of the time. That was the second highest rate in Week 1, only behind Anthony Richardson. So they really pushed the ball down the field. They were able to get to their run game. It was really kind of a perfect balance of how they wanted to play, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And for me, my kind of refrain this offseason was I think this offense is going to be different. I think it's going to be fun, but I don't know if it's going to be good. And I think through Week 1, I'm kind of leaning toward good. They've got a lot of fun skill position players, and I think we saw them take their offensive line, which is a giant concern for all of us. And if they're being honest in the Saints facility, probably a giant concern of theirs. Those guys were clearing massive holes in the run game. They allowed the fewest pressures in the NFL in Week 1. We'll see if that's going to hold up against a very good Dallas Cowboys team that just knocked Deshaun Watson silly in Week 1 up in Cleveland. I don't anticipate they're going to look nearly as good against that front, but we'll see. I mean, maybe they look halfway decent. If they can look halfway decent against a really good Dallas Cowboys defensive front, I think they have a chance to be very good offensively this year, because all of us know that they have great skill position players. We didn't even see Chris Olave. 2 catches for 17 yards. We didn't really see much of Taysom Hill. They used him early, and then they're like, well, we're up huge. Like, might as well not blow that for the rest of the NFL to see. Let's keep that hidden in our back pocket. So I think they've got a chance to be really good, especially if they can keep Derek Carr upright, because that quarterback that played out there on Sunday against the Panthers looked like a much better version of what we saw for much of last year.
Yeah, I was going to say, Luke, I've watched a lot of NFL games, as you all know, because I'm very old, which y'all remind me of quite often on this podcast. But I haven't seen very many games in my career where there were holes as big as there were, and also just untouched runners 5-6 yards downfield before a defender's even getting close to them. That's just very unusual. You just do not see that. And I think that has a lot to do with the scheme, a lot to do with the way they want to block up front and cut off these pursuit angles. But that was rare and obviously very encouraging. I don't care who you're playing. And I agree. Kamara did look like he did have some life left, but I think I could have carried some of those balls and gotten big yards because it was that well blocked.
All right. Well, to your point, Jeff, the way that Dennis Allen talked about that victory after the game, it was like they had just gone against the Division II team. He was very much like, oh, we have a lot to clean up. Like, he didn't seem really happy at all. And that's where I wonder if just how bad Carolina is maybe distorts some of this. But they struggled against a bad Carolina team offensively last year, so I do think they deserve credit for blowing out them in this game.
Yeah, I think DA was just probably trying to he wants to keep the expectations. Well, he wants the expectation to be up. But I think he just wants his team to stay focused and locked in. And so, yeah, I think he's going to say they could win 40-0 this week, and he'll be saying the same thing. Yeah, we got a lot to clean up. That's just kind of how DA is. But I do think the offense, you look at that third and short play that they scored the first touchdown on. I mean, that was different from what we would have seen under Pete Carmichael. He probably would have done a little short pass or something to try to get the first down and keep the chains moving. But they went for the big shot, and it paid off and kind of set the tone for the rest of the afternoon.
All right, guys. A little bit different team coming up this next week. All right. So we'll talk here about the Saints matchup against the Cowboys. But before we do that, we are going to take a 30-second break to hear from one of our sponsors. All right, guys, Dallas Cowboys coming up in week 2. Here I was before the season started saying, I think the Cowboys are going to be a disappointing team this year. I don't think they're bringing in a new defensive coordinator. They lost a bunch of talent from last year's team. They got 30-year-old Zeke Elliott as their running back. They lost their starting left tackle, blah, 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 blah. They went out and smacked the Cleveland Browns in the mouth in week 1, and they looked very much like the same team they were last year, a team that was one of the better teams in the NFL for the regular season, and had another playoff disappointment, but that's not what they're facing this week. So, guys, looking at the Dallas Cowboys versus the Carolina Panthers, how big a jump in competition is this? We'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah, it's huge. I know the offensive line played really well in week 1, but that's where you have to worry, I think. Micah Parsons is so dominant. DeMarcus Lawrence, even though he's getting up there in age, he's still a very productive player for them. And Dennis Allen referenced it, that this Mike Zimmer defense too is he's one of the best defensive minds in the NFL. So I do think they're going to face a pretty different scheme-wise, a different challenge for this offense. But yeah, it's just I really do think that the defensive line could really take over this game for the Cowboys. And then I think, the Cowboys offense, they might not have a lot of playmakers, but CeeDee Lamb is still CeeDee Lamb, and Dak Prescott is still a really good quarterback, probably above average, even if he doesn't come through in the postseason. So I do think it has potential to give them a lot of problems. And, I just think that this is going to be a real good test for them.
Yeah, I would add, going on the road, I think Dallas has won like 16 straight regular season home games. I know they lost the playoff game last year to the Packers, but it's obviously one of the more difficult places to play in the league. So that intangible, dealing with the crowd noise is going to be much different. But I think in some ways, Dallas winning big was actually a good thing for the Saints, if that makes any sense. I mean, if they would have laid an egg, they would have been focused this week. In some ways, I think it helps in the intangible department of like maybe they get complacent coming home. That look at Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame won a big game. I know it's colleges, but you come home, it's easy to let your guard down. So, but it's not going to be easy. Matt said, the exact point I would be concerned about is the pass protection. I think as long as they can run the ball and they don't want to be in a lot of third and longs. That was the other thing from the game against Carolina. I think they had 1 or 2 third and beyond like 4 yards. I mean, they just never were in those situations. That's exactly what they want. They don't want to be in third and long against this team especially. But I actually foresee something of a low-scoring game because I think both defenses could kind of rule the day here.
Yeah, you look at what Dallas, when they had 6 sacks and 2 interceptions, it was a lot of the same things. They were kind of dominant like the Saints were. And I think the quarterback played for both teams. I think Bryce Young and I think Deshaun Watson both were awful in those games. And so I think both teams are now going to face a quarterback that's going to be a lot better. And the Saints obviously facing a quarterback who's making a lot of money now. So, well, he's always making a lot of money, but I mean, he's a $60 million man now. And I think he's going to want to come out and play well in front of the home crowd. I mean, kind of like what Jeff mentioned. I mean, they want to do well at home, obviously, but I think they feel like they have something to prove coming into this game back home. So it'll be a really good test of some teams that are kind of rivals, I guess. I know people here don't like the Cowboys, and I'm sure some people in Dallas that don't like the Saints. So.
Well, one thing I want to throw out, and this might just be completely worthless now that Dan Quinn is in Washington. But yeah, don't ring the bell. When you look at what this Cowboys defense has done against San Francisco in recent years and that Kyle Shanahan scheme, they've gotten their butts whooped every time they played those guys. Granted, they're doing it against Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Deebo Samuel, and lately Christian McCaffrey, a lot of A-plus players. But I do think, as we've seen with this Saints team, the Saints defense against particular types of offenses in recent years, I do think they've had a problem with this type of scheme. So the whole thing is always going to be about the players, always. And it is a massive concern with that Saints offensive line going up against this Cowboys defensive front. But I do think that there's a possibility that it ends up looking a lot better than we're all anticipating on Sunday, just because of what I've seen, with this Cowboys defense going up against a Shanahan style offense before. So we'll see how that goes. One other thing I want to throw out there is, I think Dak is I think he's much better than a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's probably closer to top 7 or 8, maybe even higher than that. So I'm really, really interested in seeing how the Saints defensive secondary fares against one of the NFL's better quarterbacks, because I think we've all talked about the Saints secondary as what we believe is one of the strengths of this team. Let's see if they can do it against one of the best in the NFL. Okay, one guy who will not be helping out the Saints defense this week, or probably for the remainder of the season, is linebacker Khaleke Hudson, who was claimed by the Cleveland Browns off the Saints practice squad. So, guys, this is our Associated Grocers transaction of the week. Today's transaction segment is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and help support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. Guys, Khaleke Hudson did not make the 53 out of training camp, but he was on the roster last week as one of the standard elevations in the practice squad. Matt, I think you wrote about him in training camp. So what can you tell us about what they're losing with Khaleke Hudson here?
Yeah, they're losing a guy that's really valuable on special teams. That was kind of his core thing in Washington, where he played before New Orleans. And then also the reason he was called up was because of mostly special teams purposes. He played 19 snaps on special teams in Sunday's game, played 5 defensively, but really it kind of just hurts their linebacker depth with DeMarco Jackson and Jalen Ford hurt right now. That's, I think, kind of the short-term concern with Hudson going to the Browns. But besides that, I mean, Anthony Orji played pretty well in Sunday's game, so they have him to go by. And then they still obviously have Demario Davis, Pete Werner, and Willie Gay. So I think they're fine at the linebacker spot. It's just a depth piece now that he's gone that kind of hurts them in the short term.
Yep, and they will be, I'm sure, filling that. They'll have to. Khaleke Hudson was one of their 17 practice squad players. Remember, they get an extra spot because of Charlie Smith, whom they have an exemption for through the international player pathway. So they have a spot available on their practice squad. I'm sure they'll have somebody out there today. So we'll keep an eye on that. And just Saints fans, remember, Associated Grocers is hiring. If you're looking to join a team dedicated to supporting independent retail grocers, apply today. Your future starts here. Guys, Yeah, we're talking about the Cowboys offense. We're talking about this great secondary the Saints have going up against one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and frankly one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and CeeDee Lamb. They could potentially be doing that without Marshawn Lattimore this week. So let's get into injuries here. A number of guys left the game on Sunday against the Panthers. We had Lucas Patrick, toe, Matt, am I remembering that correctly? Lucas Patrick with a toe injury, Marshawn Lattimore with a hamstring injury. Foster Moreau was put in the concussion protocol, and we still didn't. Rod, did you find out what it was with Willie Gay? No. Okay. So 4 players left the game with injuries. We get a new injury report today, and we don't really know exactly what the extent of those are yet. So, guys, are injuries a bit of a concern after week 1 for you?
For me, if you go without Marshawn Lattimore, I mean, that's a big hit against this team. You mentioned CeeDee Lamb, but Brandon Cooks, who former Saint, he had a touchdown the other day. I mean, they do have some weapons on that side of the ball, and obviously this team has always been better when Marshawn's playing than when he's not playing. They do have a lot of depth in the secondary, so that helps. I mean, you got some Kool-Aid McKinstry, these guys, but when you're going against a guy like CeeDee Lamb, you like to have Marshawn Lattimore out there.
Yeah, look, I think if Lattimore doesn't go, we'd expect McKinstry to get the start, and Dallas is going to try and target him. So it'd be a big difference between a guy like Lattimore that's been through the wars. Everybody, it just creates a domino effect. All of a sudden, the Debo is going to be the guy taking CeeDee Lamb, and it just kind of trickles on down the rest of the secondary. So he'd be a big loss.
Well, Matt, I kind of want to tee you up on this one because I think one of the reasons that CeeDee Lamb kind of exploded toward the back half of last year was Cowboys started moving him all over the field. They played him outside, they played him a lot in the slot, and he was very good in the slot. With Lattimore, they probably would have just traveled him with Lamb wherever he went on the field. But if he's not able to play, that kind of opens up an idea for the Cowboys to just put Lattimore or put Lamb on whoever's across from him, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't really see, as well as Paulson Adebo played last year and played on Sunday, I don't think he's the travel type, but I just think it kind of makes more sense for McKinstry to stay on one side, Adebo, and then Alontae Taylor. Like these guys, McKinstry's the wild card here because I think you would trust Adebo and Taylor to match up against CeeDee Lamb, all things considered. Like you wouldn't have to force Adebo inside or anything to travel with him. It's just McKinstry in his first really big test can he hold up there. So he was a very impressive college corner. He played well, I thought, in the preseason and stuff like that. So it just really depends. But I think Lattimore's talked he hasn't talked all offseason, but when we did talk to him, he said that he wanted the opportunity to show that he was still a top corner in this league. And if he misses this game, it's a lost opportunity to kind of prove he's still up there because CeeDee Lamb is a top 5 receiver in the NFL.
For what it's worth, Marshawn Lattimore, I did speak with him in the locker room after the game, and he said he's solid. He's good. We'll see exactly what that means when they go out here to practice in about an hour. Dunk, I want to get your thoughts here. I know you watched the replay of the game pretty closely. After Lucas Patrick left, they put Landon Young in at left guard. Landon's a player that we've seen for the majority of his career at tackle. How do you think he did there? And I guess if Patrick can't go, we're talking about either Landon Young or Nick Saldiveri, who we haven't seen since the earliest days of training camp.
Yeah, no, I thought he played well. I thought the whole offensive line played well throughout the game. I mean, to me, if they were giving out game balls, which I know they did, that would have been the first game ball I gave, would be the offensive line collectively. And I think Young's a guy they trust because he's been in the system. Well, I know it's a new scheme, but he's been around this staff for a while, and I think he's a versatile guy. But he's going to have his hands full in this game. I know the strength of the Cowboys are out on the edges, and they're not as strong, I think, at the second level as they've been in the past. So that's an area I think the Saints can exploit. They really had some nice interior runs against Carolina where they would bring the tight ends over and do these nice kind of crack blocks and things to open up. A lot of same things we saw the Niners do the other night with Jordan Mason. So I do think the Saints can run the ball, and I think Landon Young will be a big part of that.
Can we find out how hard it was for Jeff to give a compliment to a Kentucky alum, Landon Young?
Yeah, that was definitely hard. But do we want to talk about Kentucky South Carolina game, or we get another pod for that? We'll talk about that at a future date. That was fun to watch.
We'll talk about it.
We'll let South Carolina play LSU first, and then we'll do it all next week.
Yeah. No, look, I think, going back to something you said earlier, Luke, that I wanted to bring up. I mean, I do think it's going to be fascinating to watch Mike Zimmer, who's given the Saints fits in the past. I would say he's probably the one coordinator that gave Sean Payton's scheme the most trouble. And now he's going against Clint Kubiak, who worked for Mike Zimmer, right? So, he's going to be familiar with what he likes to do, but I'm sure there's been some evolution and tweaks that Kubiak has added. I think that chess match is going to be fascinating to watch in this game.
Yeah, Kubiak was not running this scheme when he was in Minnesota. I'll tell you that. I think it was pretty clear from Sunday's game how heavy that San Francisco influence is on what Kubiak's doing right now. I think this is a completely different version of the offense he called plays for in Minnesota and Denver. So I think that's going to be fascinating to watch, though. I think this is a real huge test for the Saints offense to show that what it did in week one was not an entire fluke. Obviously, nobody's expecting them to go out, put up 47 points every week, but very, very strong start. One thing I do want to bring up before we leave off of injuries here. Foster Moreau left the game with a concussion, or in the concussion protocol. Obviously, we don't know. Those are always tricky. We saw Derek Carr last year not miss any time after sustaining a concussion in a game. We've seen Taysom Hill miss 2 games because of concussion. You never know with these sorts of things, but I do think that's one that could potentially be tricky for the Saints, because if you're looking at their roster right now, he's their only true inline tight end. And even if Dallin Holker is able to come back this week from an ankle injury, that he's not that guy. So I think just from a roster construction standpoint, this could be a very interesting injury to watch, especially going up against this high-powered Dallas defense in front.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Moreau has that chemistry with Carr dating back to their days with the Raiders that really kind of didn't take hold last year, but I thought you saw it against the Panthers. Foster Moreau revealed recently that he had been dealing with a foot injury kind of all of last year, and kind of went into the details of how gruesome it was. So I do think Moreau is definitely maybe a weapon for the Saints, and his absence would be missed. But I actually think on the other side, the Cowboys potentially missing Jake Ferguson, that's a big one for them as well. I mean, I saw Jerry Jones say that he was optimistic Ferguson could play, but he's dealing with a knee injury, and he could miss this week. So the Saints could get a little lucky there if Ferguson has to miss some time.
All right, guys, let's wrap it up because we got to go out here to practice in about an hour. We are going to be back on Friday, hopefully, assuming that everything goes okay with Hurricane Francine here. We will do a full preview of the Saints matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, hopefully with some more information on who might be in, who might be out, all that kind of good stuff. We've got a lot of good stuff coming for you over at NOLA.com. Yes, we will have stuff in a print edition if that is something you read every day. So keep it locked over there with all of us. And we are going to try to stay safe in the storm, guys. We are going to be driving out to practice here in a second, but then we come back and then we we do the thing where we get inside and maybe crack an adult beverage and watch a storm roll through.
Hurricane party time. Let's do it.
All right, guys, that is it from all of us. I'm Luke Johnson. I was joined today by Rod Walker, Jeff Duncan, and Matthew Paris. Please stay safe in this storm. If you've got to leave, please leave. Do everything to make sure you come out of this thing okay. And if you want to track updates, NOLA.com will have y'all covered. Until then, we will catch y'all Friday, and stay safe.